Mistreated by his stepmother, a boy is saved by a German shepherd and U.S. police abuser pays the price. Blizzard winds eat the lights of Truckee until the town feels erased. A tiny shape fights through waist-high powder. Ezra Holt, 4 cheeks raw, clutching a chipped wooden horse that still smells of cedar. He stops where the fence bends and blinks at the snow. 2 trails cut across the drifts, his small, staggering prints, and a second set, longer, older, wandering in from the trees, circling, then vanishing as if swallowed. On Ezra's mitten a loose blue thread flashes, then hides again. He presses the horse to his chest and feels a scratch under the belly, 117 carved so small he never noticed. The wind throws needles through the pines. Somewhere a freight moans like a door refusing to close. Ezra whispers, "Take me where kind people live," and steps toward the darker ridge. Above Donner Lake a patrol SUV crawls with wipers ticking like a clock that won't forgive. Officer Caleb Reed leans into the wheel as the radio coughs 3 clipped words: child, outside, north. In the footwell, Titan, scar-eared German shepherd, amber eyes, lifts his head, inhales and lets out one urgent whine that reads like a command. Caleb kills the siren, clips the tracking line and follows as Titan drags upslope, nose skimming wire, breath blooming white. The beam from Caleb's flashlight catches a fallen mitten, a splintered twig, and half buried beside them a torn silver star from a coat. The wind shifts. Titan freezes, ears forward. Something moves beyond the curtain of snow, small, shaking, not alone. What happened next will leave you in tears and restore your faith in miracles. Drop your country below. If no child should face cold alone, hit subscribe and type. Morning eased across Truckee with a dim metallic light that made the snow look hammered and cold. Plows groaned along Donner Pass Road, faintly lit roofs and porches, stairs pushing heavy ridges that steamed like breath. Donner Lake lay dark and still, a band of mist sliding over it as if the mountains were breathing. Pines rimmed the shore, straight backs inked against a pewter sky. Streetlights lingered, throwing pale circles that dissolved as day strengthened. Inside a second-floor apartment, warmth fluttered from old radiators. The rooms were small and neat. A window over the sink framed pines banded with snow. On a hook near the door hung a patched coat with shiny cuffs. Beneath it stood scuffed boots. Ezra Holt, 4 years old and careful in the way of children who read rooms, stood on a chair and pressed his palm to the glass until his skin hummed with cold. In his other hand, Ezra held a wooden horse. His father carved it months before, shaping the neck with a pocket knife and rubbing oil into the grain. One ear carried a chip, the flank showed a notch like lightning. Ezra traced those marks whenever the building groaned or the wind pressed along the siding. A tiny cord bridle had frayed and been tied again. The toy was the one thing that stayed where he left it. Vivian Cole moved through the kitchen with efficient steps. A worn apron tied over a gray sweater and jeans, mid-30s hair pinned back, sark green eyes. She ran the sink, measured oats into a dented pot, and stirred with a flat spoon. Steam lifted. The smell of warm cereal softened the metal tang in the air. She set 2 bowls on the table. "Sit," she said. The word wasn't harsh, just spare. Ezra climbed down, placed the horse on the chair beside him, and folded his hands until Vivian nodded. She pushed a bowl toward him and set a spoon across the rim. "Eat while it's hot." Ezra took careful sips, mindful of sound. The scrape of metal on ceramic made Vivian flinch, so he lifted the spoon clean each time. A photograph leaned against a flour jar. Nathan Holt, hard hat tipped back, smiled under a dusting of saw powder. He worked where the county needed framing or reinforcement, as a foreman who followed bids from Reno into the high cuts above the pass. He called when shifts ended and wrote when storms folded roads. He loved his boy, and his voice carried that truth even when static chewed the edges of syllables. Vivian ladled more cereal and glanced at the calendar near the door. A rent note, 2 diner shifts circled, a reminder about boots. She wasn't a villain in her own mind. She was tired and guarding a life that eroded a little each week. Tired trimmed softness from sentence. "Boots after breakfast," she said. "Sidewalk slick. Be quick." Ezra nodded. After 5 spoonfuls he lifted his eyes. "Can I bring horse?" Vivian's shoulders dropped a fraction. "Fine," she said. "But carry it. No dragging." Outside the day bit clean. Pine smell stood bright. Rooftops dropped sheets that shattered into powder. Ezra stepped onto the shoveled path. Boots finding the crunch that sounded like sugar breaking. Chains clicked on passing tires. Vivian walked fast, bag angled against her hip, head down as if measuring each patch of ice. Ezra matched her stride for a while, then lagged a step, hitching the horse against his coat. The market doors breathed warmth that smelled like oranges, coffee and paper. Vivian collected bread, beans, broth and a small square of butter wrapped in gold. She checked prices against coupons and frowned when the total climbed. Ezra kept one palm on the cart and one around the horse, eyes drifting to a poster near the pet aisle where a German shepherd sat with a proud tilt. The caption promised demonstrations by working dogs from the department. Ezra whispered the name and hugged the toy closer. Back home, Boots steamed beside the door. The radiator ticked and sighed. Ezra climbed onto the chair by the window and drew a circle in the fog left by his breath. He added 2 ears, a long muzzle, brave eyes and a collar with a bone-shaped tag. Beneath the chin he printed letters slowly and carefully. Sir Bark. The name warmed his chest. He pressed his forehead to the glass, and imagined the dog sleeping under their balcony with snow speckling its fur. Afternoon settled gray and early. Vivian folded laundry, rang the diner about a late delivery, and moved piles from one side of the counter to the other. She reminded Ezra to stack blocks, hang the coat properly, and stop tapping his heel on the table leg. The words weren't cruel, only thin. Neglect in that home sounded like absence where presence would have been easy. Ezra folded a towel until the corners met and looked up as if waiting to be seen. Vivian nodded once, distracted by a list she was writing. The phone rang after dark arrived too soon. Nathan's voice climbed out of static, warm and tired. "Hey champ," he said, "how's my helper?" Ezra told him about the plows, the bird that left stitch marks on the rail, and the poster with the big dog. Nathan laughed softly. "That's a brave visitor," he said. "I'm pinned near the pass, but I'll be home when roads open." Vivian stood near the sink, drying a pan and listening. Her grip eased on the towel. Dinner began hopeful and turned sour. Ezra held his fork like Nathan had taught him. Elbows. Vivian talked about tips that vanished, a cook who burned toast, and a customer who snapped for more coffee. Ezra lifted the horse to show where the notch looked like lightning. Vivian's jaw set. Not at the table. He lowered it at once and stared at the potato until it blew. Silence gathered. Pipes thumped. The wind pressed a long palm against the window and scraped at the frame. When plates were stacked, Ezra folded his napkin into a square and slid off the chair. He climbed back onto the window seat and found his drawing waiting in the chill sheet. He traced the muzzle once and whispered, "You're real." On the counter, Vivian wiped the table until it shone. She paused and studied the outline. Muscles in her face softened, then set again as if she remembered a bill. "Bed soon," she said. "Early shift." She started down the hall and stopped. "That dog," she added almost to herself, then kept walking. Later the heat clicked while the wind combed the ridge. Ezra tucked the horse into the crook of his arm. He imagined Sir Bark under the balcony, chest rising slowly, ears pricked, tail tapping whenever he breathed too fast. Vivian stood in the doorway, a tall shape cut from hallway light. She opened her mouth, closed it, then said, "Good night," in a voice careful as someone crossing aisle. Ezra whispered, "Night," and listened to the radiators tick as the building settled like a tired animal. Snow sifted against the window like quiet ash. Dinner unraveled with a single clatter. Ezra Holt set his wooden horse beside the plate the way he always did, careful fingers placing it just beyond the fork so soup wouldn't splash the grain. Steam drifted, the radiator ticked, and winter pressed hard palms against the windows. Vivian Cole moved between stove and sink with tight shoulders and quick, economical steps, her worn apron dark at the hem, her green eyes narrowed by fatigue. When Ezra leaned to rescue a pea that skittered toward the edge, his elbow tapped the horse. The toy slid, bumped the chair rung, and clicked onto the linoleum. Vivian spun as if the sound mocked her. "Can't you keep anything still?" The words landed like sleet. Ezra picked up the horse, rubbed the notched flank, and placed it on the chair. He chewed without tasting, lap warm from the radiator pipe humming under the table. Wind rattled the window, found a seam, and sang a cold thread through the room. Nathan Holt's photo leaned near the flour jar, smiling through sawdust from a job above the pass. The smile looked far away. Ezra swallowed, then lifted his gaze. "Can I keep it close?" he asked, fingers already sliding toward the toy. "Eat," Vivian said, scrubbing a plate as if it had wronged her. "I'm not running a nursery." After the dishes, Vivian wiped and re-wiped the surface until the bulb reflected in a perfect circle. Ezra climbed onto the window seat and traced in the fog his dog with a proud muzzle and bright eyes, the tag beneath reading Sir Bark. Vivian paused behind him, dishcloth hanging. For a moment her shoulders loosened, then duty re-tightened every line. "Bed," she said. "I'm up before sunrise." She turned, stopped again, and added, "You have to grow up," softer as if the softness irritated her. The apartment quieted into building sounds, a neighbor's laugh through the wall, hot water sighing in pipes, tires hissing on snow outside. Ezra stood by the coat hooks. His patched jacket waited there, cuffs shiny, zipper stubborn near the top. He pushed the pull with 2 hands, tugged until it sealed. Boots felt heavy but brave. He pressed the horse to his cheek and felt the coolness steady his breath. The ache that started at dinner had widened and wouldn't close. He pictured the poster at the market, the shepherd holding a calm sit as if listening only to good hearts. The latch clicked lightly when he tested it. The door offered a tired groan. Ezra froze, listening for Vivian's step. None came. He eased the knob, held the weight of the door so hinges wouldn't complain, and slipped into the stairwell, where cold spilled down like water. Stairs creaked. The lower hallway smelled of wet wool and salt. He reached the outer handle, pulled, and had to lean his whole small body because the wind fought from the other side. The door gave, and the night rushed in, white, loud, alive. Snow whirled with purpose. Flakes stung like needles. Streetlights blurred into halos, a string of pale moons across the block. Chains clanked on a passing pickup, the sound swallowed quickly by the storm. Pines beside the building shivered and shook drifts from their shoulders. Ezra tucked the horse under his coat, lowered his head, and stepped into thigh-high powder. Cold bit through layers, but moving made its own heat. "We're going where kind people live," he whispered to the toy's ear, the words turning to vapor that the gale stole. He followed the fence because fences know where they go. His mitten slid along the wire, and the other arm hugged the horse. Boot prints behind him looked timid, then smaller, then gone as new snow erased them. A freight wailed beyond town, deep and slow, a door refusing to close. Ezra pretended that the moan was a humming voice leading him forward. The sidewalk ended in a ridge, left by the plow. He climbed on hands and knees, boots slipping, breath bursting white. At the top he looked back at the apartment's windows. Squares of yellow glowed like coins he couldn't spend. He turned and faced the rise. The utility cut where brush had been cleared under the lines gave him a straight path uphill. On that open slice the wind had teeth. It bit ears, snatched at the scarf Vivian had wrapped too tightly, and made his eyes water until lashes froze. He counted steps to keep panic from spilling over. 10, breathe, 10, breathe. His father had taught him that on a busy sidewalk once, showing how to cross chaos by making small rhythms. Ezra followed that lesson now, drumbeat steady in a white roar. A park sign leaned under a glade. Past it a footbridge arched over a creek mostly hidden by snow. The boards flexed under his weight with a muffled groan. Water murmured somewhere below, a secret voice trapped under glass. Ezra paused in the middle and pressed his cheek to the horse's smooth belly. He imagined a table where someone would say his name like a blessing and where laughter rose with the kettle's steam. The imagining warmed him enough to take 3 more careful steps. On the far bank, young pines formed a darker patch, and inside that patch the wind lost some strength. Branches clacked and then softened into a whisper. Ezra worked along the fence that climbed beside the slope. His tracks wobbled. Each gust laid a shimmering veil over them. The town below shrank to dust. A red arc from a turning truck, a porch light flickering, a lone window steady as a candle, signs of lives moving on without him. He let that truth pass through without stopping. A lower wire sagged near a post. Ezra slipped under and felt the mitten catch. The yarn gave up a single blue thread that fluttered against the metal. He almost reached back for it, then thought, leave it. A tiny flag might tell the world he had been brave. The grade steepened, Trees leaned closer, his breath shortened and tasted like metal. He wanted to sleep. He kept choosing steps instead. Ice pellets began to tick against his hood, sharp as sand. The world narrowed to gray and white, and the memory of warm wood under his hand, when his father carved the horse. Another long cry rose from the direction of the tracks. Steadying his feet, Ezra chose a faint trail that angled across the hillside. Maybe deer had made it. It bent toward a notch where the ridge opened to the sky. Under drooping boughs heavy with snow he knelt to let the tremble leave his leg. Wind thinned there, the pine holding off the worst of the weather like a shield. Ezra pressed a kiss to the horse and tasted a splinter, a prick that said stay awake. He could almost smell cocoa, could almost hear a cup set gently on a saucer by hands that cared whether his lips burned. His eyes closed, he opened them again. Not yet, he whispered. Have you ever felt alone in a storm? Share a moment of hope in the comments to inspire others. Between gusts came a sound less wild than wind. An engine ground up a steep grade, patient, stubborn, refusing to quit. Ezra held his breath. The noise faded, then grew, then faded again as if searching. A far light might be working the same hill he fought. Help felt possible, which scared him because disappointment could hurt worse than the cold. He crawled from the shelter and the notch lay just beyond a last short stand of trunks. His footprints behind were already faint hollows sliding shut. The sight pinched fear through him. If steps could vanish, maybe boys could too. He pushed faster, following the narrow track through the final weave of branch. The ridge opened like a door. Wind slammed it wide. Ezra staggered, caught himself and kept moving until the slope eased under his boots. Up here the storm roared like yet beyond the far line of trees a thin glow colored the gray, and for a breath he believed, morning waited in a kinder town. Almost there, he told the horse. Wire hummed under the gale along the fence he now used as a guide. From below a sound rose that was not wind, not train, not engine. A keen note curled through the storm, alive, alert, impossible to ignore. Ezra stopped with his head tilted, heart thudding. The call came again, closer, insistent, as if someone faithful was crossing the night toward him and would not stop. He smiled, tightened his hold on the horse and stepped toward the glow, while the snow worked to erase every mark he left. He walked toward that faint promise while snow tried to erase everything. Snow erased the edges of Truckee while a patrol SUV climbed the grade above Donner Lake, tires chewing ruts that refilled between rotations. Officer Caleb Reed kept both hands low on the wheel, posture steady, gaze pinned where hood met storm. 38 years had etched patience rather than panic. Hazel eyes read distance even when distance vanished. The radio cracked through the wind. A dispatcher relayed a neighbor's breathless report. A small child outside following the fence toward the power cut. In the rear, a 5-year-old German shepherd lifted into a poised sit. Titan's chest looked carved from oak, coat dense against the cold, ears triangular, one with a neat notch near the tip from a long-ago scrape. Amber's eyes tracked every motion. Caleb reached back and felt a rough tongue across 2 knuckles. Good boy, he said. We'll work it. Headlights carved a tunnel that closed after the bumper passed. The SUV nosed to the curb at the caller's address. A porch lamp trembled behind driven snow. The neighbor met him under the overhang, jacket zipped to the chin, words tumbling into mist. Saw the boy at the fence, saw boots sink, saw a wooden horse clutched under a coat, watched the outline tilt uphill. Caleb thanked her, checked the time, and radioed an update. Titan hopped down, shook once, and angled into the gale as if scent had a color painted across it. Caleb clipped the tracking line to a padded harness and checked the fit by habit. Snow pecked exposed skin. Crystals ticked against metal. Titan inhaled in short sequences, sorting cold information the storm tried to tear apart. A low whine slid through his throat. Purpose. Track, Caleb murmured. Titan moved to the fence. On the lowest strand a single blue thread fluttered against steel. Caleb noted it and left it. The shepherd traced a loop until nose and brain agreed, then chose a line with certainty. Caleb followed, boots punching crust and finding softer layers that sighed and compressed. Each step produced its own crunch, a metronome that steadied thought. Floodlight shadows slid over scrub, then night closed fast. The world shrank to a narrow beam from Caleb's lamp and the silhouette ahead. Wind declared itself along feeder lines with a deep hum. then rose to a scream. Titan leaned into it, haunches low, shoulders working, the harness line taut enough to sing. Caleb let that pull carry him through a drift that wanted to hold him in one place. Across town, Vivian Cole stepped into Ezra's room and felt a cold answer like a fact. The blanket lay thrown back. The chair stood empty. The spot where the wooden horse usually waited sat bare. Anger sprang first, then drained through a crack under her ribs. She lifted the latch and found a drift on the sill where a child's palm had been. She yanked on her parka, jammed her feet into boots and hurried out, following the alley to the fence. Titan paused at a narrow bridge over a creek whose voice sounded trapped under glass. Caleb's beam found faint prints spaced unevenly across boards already blurring under fresh fall. He crouched, judged size and stride, and felt his chest tighten. These belonged to someone very small who had walked with resolve and fatigue. "Good," he said as Titan surged, towing him over the arc and into the teeth of wind on the far bank. They climbed. The town behind became a scatter of weak stars, brake halos, porch glows, a single window that refused to blink. Caleb kept the radio near his cheek and gave position as best as training allowed when markers vanished. Search and rescue signed. A net tightened, care gathering around a wandering point. Titan angled into a pocket of pines. Snow under trees settled into softer drifts that squeaked rather than cracked. The dog threaded trunks with practiced grace. The lamp caught a mitten print pressed against bark. Small fingers splayed like a relief carving. Nearby the top wire dipped, and on that dip the blue thread wavered, frozen into a tiny flag. The shepherd touched metal with his nose and swung right. Decision clean. Vivian reached the lot and followed the fence where Titan had begun. Boots punched through the crust until they filled with ice water. She called the boy's name. Wind ate sound and burned her eyes. She thought of words used at dinner and hated every letter. She prayed for the first time in years. The slope conquered breath, yet fear pulled harder than gravity. Caleb and Titan topped a berm where the cut opened to sky. A gust shoved hard enough to lock lungs. They braced. Titan tested left, tested right, then chose right without looking back. The line tight. Caleb gave it, letting canine certainty lead. He pictured a small figure in a patched coat, clutching something made by love, and let that picture keep legs working. Snow thinned for a heartbeat. The beam found a shallow depression under a bent bough where needles carried a quilt of white. Edges looked crisp. Prints pressed down and then lifted again showed movement moments earlier. Titan trembled, chuffed, then gave one contained bark that meant there was something ahead worth both haste and care. Caleb touched the spot, then rose. From below, a cry climbed the slope. Not storm, not train. A voice frayed by fright. Caleb pivoted and saw movement far downslope, a figure staggering along the fence, coat thrashing. He angled his lamp, shouted, and caught a flash of green eyes before the person turned from the glare. Vivian kept climbing, panic heavier than tired legs. Titan hauled again, purpose deepening into a tone that matched the wire's song, 2 notes turning chaos into direction. Snow brushed chalk across Caleb's cheek. He let the harness drag him through a last stand of saplings, until the wind fell for a breath as the ridge bowed to shelter a shallow basin. A small shape trembled somewhere beyond the next fold of ground. Instinct knew before light could prove it. Caleb keyed his mic and gave an update. Near the service gate above the creek, moving northeast along the fence, signs of a brief laydown and renewed movement. He squeezed the line, felt Titan lean, and closed the distance inch by inch while Boots packed a path no gust could immediately erase. If a dog's loyalty moves you, comment Titan below to honor heroes like him. Vivian reached the berm and saw tracks that had not yet vanished. She slid, caught herself, then slid again until she hit a drift that held like a wall. She pounded it, then crawled over, parka flapping. Wind shoved, but another force hauled her forward. The picture of a boy who had stopped asking and started leaving. She whispered his name between breaths. The ridge widened. The storm eased by a degree that felt like mercy. Titan angled toward a darker lump beneath a bowed pine, setting paws with care so he would not bury what mattered. Caleb followed, breath harsh, heart steady, ready to meet whatever waited under the drifting veil with patience reserved for frightened children and the resolve he kept for nights when the mountain tested every vow he had ever made. Titan breathed once and pulled forward. Snow hammered the basin until sound thinned to a hiss and every breath felt borrowed. Titan slowed at a shallow hollow where a pine bent under winter's load, its branches sagging like a white tent. Beneath that low roof a small body lay curled tight, knees to chest, boots half buried, a patched coat glazed with rime. Blue lips trembled around thin, fast breaths. Tiny hands gripped a wooden horse as if the smooth flank could keep the world from slipping away. The shepherd dropped to his belly and inched forward, shoulders low, ears soft, tail a quiet metronome. He pressed warm fur along the child's shins without weight and breathed slowly, steam drifting through needles. A low whine, barely a sound, told the boy, "I am here, keep breathing." Caleb Reed slid in behind, lamp carving a wavering disc through the flurry. He unhooked the tracking line, sank to one knee and kept his voice level. "Hey there," he said, palms open. "I'm Caleb. This is Tight." The dog nosed under a small wrist and settled, heartbeat steady against the boy's bones. Ezra's lashes fluttered. He clutched the horse closer, blinked toward the solid warmth pressed beside him, and didn't flinch when the big head eased nearer. "You're safe now, buddy." Caleb tore open a foil packet with numb fingers. The thermal blanket unfurled with a bright whisper. He wrapped it snugly around Ezra, tucking corners over calves and shoulders, then cupped a chilled cheek through the crackling sheet to shield skin from the gale. The beam caught Hazel's eyes surfacing from the edge, dazed but present. A faint smile ghosted across Ezra's mouth at Titan's nearness, as if a picture on a market poster had stepped off its paper and turned real. Wind slammed into the hollow and flung a fresh sheet across the opening. Snow swirled like a curtain yanked by an impatient stagehand. Caleb shifted to block the gust, radio close to his mouth. He called their position, requested medics to the service gate above the creek and warned of hard drifts under the lee. Titan widened contact without pinning fragile limbs, chin resting lightly across Ezra's knees. Teeth chattered once under the blanket, then settled as trapped heat gathered. "Cold," Ezra whispered. "I know," Caleb said. "Breathe with me." He counted quiet beats, giving the child a rhythm to borrow. In, out, good. A figure crested the berm, skidded, and windmilled down the far side. Vivian Cole's parka snapped like a sail. Ice filmed her lash. She saw the shining bundle under the tree and lurched toward it, rage tangled with relief until words ripped out ragged. "Give him to me," she demanded. "He belongs with me." Caleb kept his palm raised without rising, his body between her and the child. "Ma'am, step back," he said, tone even. "The boy is under protective custody for medical evaluation." The storm seized that sentence and shredded it into drifting fragments. Vivian took another step, Titan's head lifted. A low growl rolled from his chest, not a threat so much as a line etched on snow that asked to be respected. Her boot hit a hidden plate of ice. Feet shot sideways. She pitched toward a buried stump. Caleb lunged, but the dog moved first. Titan sprang, teeth catching canvas at her sleeve, weight dropping into the pull. Momentum bent, danger deflected. She collapsed onto a drift instead of the stump, breath blasting white. For a breath she lay stunned, blinking at the torn sleeve and the dog that had kept bone from wood. Titan released fabric, backed a pace, then returned to Ezra like a hinge closing. Vivian stared at him, then at the small face peeking above silver folds. Her features crumpled and set again, shame and fury wrestling under wind-burned skin. "I didn't mean," she began, swallowed the rest and stood shaking. Caleb didn't look away from the child. "You can help by giving us space," he said. He slid a heat pack between the foil and coat near Ezra's core and checked the cap, scarf and fingertips for white patch. The boy's grip on the horse refused to loosen. "Short ride," Caleb promised. "Then lights, cocoa and people whose only job is warmth." Titan's amber eyes flicked between Ezra's face and the ridgeline, every line of him watchful, calm. Sirens threaded the storm, mournful notes bending around trunks. Caleb flashed his lamp twice toward the service road and turned his shoulder to shield Ezra's eyes. Pellets pinged against foil. Color began creeping along the boy's cheeks, faint as sunrise through. Vivian rubbed the sleeve that bore fresh tooth marks and stared at Titan with bewildered gratitude. She didn't know where to put. "You saved me," she said, more to herself than anyone. The dog didn't glance up. His work had priorities. Headlights washed the fence with a flat rectangle. An engine ground to a stop at the gate. A medic dropped from the rig with a bag, face striped by flying ice. "Vitals," he called. "Mailed hypothermia responsive," Caleb answered. He slid his arms under the foil and lifted Ezra in a compact cradle, careful of stiff joints. Titan rose with him, maintaining contact as if an invisible rope ran from dog to boy. Vivian reached instinctively. Caleb shook his head. "Stay," he said, not unkindly. "Path slick. We'll stabilize him first." They climbed out of the bowl step by step, boots biting, then collapsing the crust behind. Snow slashed sideways. Ezra tucked his face against Caleb's collar, a small weight nestled in silver that crackled with each move. The wooden horse pressed between chest and blanket, warm now where heat gathered. Titan took the lead, placing paws where crust would hold and pausing when drifts hid holes. At the berm's lip, the wind punched again. Caleb bent and rode it, turning so the foil caught less force while the dog threaded a safe line through sagging brush. Vivian scrambled after them, slower, chastened by the near fall and by the sound that had risen from Titan's throat. Shame pulled tight through memory, dinner words thrown like stones, a room that had felt colder than the night. She kept moving because stopping meant thinking, and thinking cut deep. At the fence the world brightened under working lamp. The medic spread a padded board and a dry sheet, hands fast and gentle. "Hi buddy," he told Ezra with practiced calm, "we're going to make you warm all the way through." Caleb settled the child onto the board, tucking blanket edges. Ezra's mittened hand slipped from the foil, searching. Titan stepped in without waiting for a command, and pressed his ruff into that reach. The faint smile bloomed wider when fur brushed a wrist. The medic slid a cap over blue-tipped ears, checked pulse and nodded. "Good recovery," he said. Another officer eased between Vivian and the gurney. "Ma'am, we'll take your statement in the vehicle," he said softly. She looked past him at the small face and the dog that would not step away. "Is he going to be all right?" she asked. "That is the plan," Caleb said, steady and fine. "Now we follow the procedure." Snow kept falling, tireless and indifferent, yet unable to erase the stubborn partnership that had formed under the pine. Caleb signed the run sheet with a glove off, skin reddening in seconds, then pulled it back on and crouched again beside the board. "We're moving you now," he told Ezra. The boy seemed to read comfort more than words, following the cadence of a voice that didn't hurry. Titan leaped into the rear, turned and planted forepaws on the bench so amber eyes stayed level with Ezra's face. The rig lurched, spun once, then bit into a track cut by a trailing unit. Vivian stood in the swirling wake, coat snapping, hair iced, expression hollowed by a storm that had started long before tonight, and would take work to lift. Tires chewed ruts that refilled between rotations. Caleb braced one hand on the board to steady the bumps and another on the radio to guide the convoy down. Titan's tail thumped once against metal when Ezra inhaled more deeply. The faint smile didn't fade. The growl had gone quiet, replaced by watchfulness that lived in the dog like a vow. At the lot a canopy flapped over a makeshift warm zone. Heat lamps glowed dull orange. Steam fogged the air around medics moving like choreographers who had practiced this dance through too many winters. They slid Ezra from board to gurney, without breaking the quilt of warmth they had built. Caleb stepped back to give room, but stayed close enough to answer every question before it formed. 4 years old, he supplied. Exposure about an hour. Motor response intact. Wooden horse stays with him. A medic smiled at that last detail and tucked the toy beside Ezra's hip under the blanket edge. Titan sat against the wheel, breathing slowly, ready to stand on a syllable. "He's staying," Caleb told the team when someone measured the shepherd with a skeptical glance. "He earned it." No one argued. Outside the lamps the ridge still roared. Inside the world narrowed to heartbeat, blanket and the steady presence of 2 guardians who did not leave. Caleb squeezed Ezra's shoulder through the foil. "You did great," he said. Titan lowered his head until whiskers tickled a small wrist. Ezra's smile, faint as dawn, held. The mountain hurled another gust that rattled tarps and fences, yet the fragile warmth inside the canopy did not break. It spread stubborn and quiet, as if the night itself had decided to step back and let mercy work. The convoy left the ridge, engines low, weaving through black pines until the wind softened to a muffled hiss. A forest outpost waited above a meadow, its walls timbered and tight, roof heaped with white. Smoke rose from a short chimney and spread a scent of cedar and coffee that met the cold at the door. Inside, a cast-iron stove snapped and radiated, light reaching braided rugs, a scarred table and pegs crowded with wet jackets. Caleb carried Ezra past the threshold, Foyle whispering, the wooden horse under the blanket. Titan trotted beside them, nails quiet on the planks, head tilted to match each breath inside the silver. Paramedic Sam Turner, 40, broad, gruff, kind behind steady eyes, met them at a padded bench. He checked pupils, counted beats at a wrist, slipped a thermometer, and waited. Numbers settled. Mild hypothermia, responsive, he said, already reaching for a dry quilt. Will rewarm, then roll. Nurse Elena Ruiz had the station prepped, towels warming by the stove, a fleece spread and a capped bottle filled and wrapped. 27, quick, composed, with warm brown eyes that made rooms feel safer. She slid the hot pack against Ezra's core and tucked another near the calves. Wet scarf off, dry knit on, mittens swapped, socks eased over pinking toes. Hola pequeño, she murmured, heat is coming. Caleb knelt until his face met the child's line. Ezra's lashes lifted. Pupils found the badge, then the shepherd, then the fire, as if a map inside his head redrew itself with kinder roads. No one can hurt you here, Caleb said. Ezra breathed and held onto that sentence the way fingers hold a rail. Titan curled along the bench with ribs touching Foyle, his slow inhale offering a rhythm a smaller body could copy. Sam poured cocoa from a dented pot, cooled it with a splash of milk, and passed the mug to Elena, who steadied it near Ezra's hands until fingers reached without shaking. The first sip brought color to a mouth the storm had turned pale stone. Steam braided with wood smoke and the room deepened into comfort that would live in memory. The horse lay along the blanket's edge, its grain gleaming like a faithful thing. Outside, tires crunched and faded as units repositioned. A deputy dropped forms on the table and radioed a welfare specialist. Another officer guided Vivian inside. Snow slicked her hair, lashes clumped. The parka sleeve still showed a rip where teeth had caught. She took one step toward the bench, stopped when Titan's amber eyes found her, and stood where a backup hand rested at her arm. Words that had burned on the hill died under the stove's glow. Elena checked again. Cap secure, skin warming, pulse strong. She tucked the fleece higher and set the mug back between small hands. Sip, campione, she said. Ezra pressed his cheek into Titan's ruff and whispered, Sir Bark. The dog flicked his ears, let his tail brush the boards twice, then went still. Caleb's mouth tipped at one corner, an expression that meant hope dared to return, but he would guard it by staying calm. Sam logged vitals. Transport after rewarming, he told Caleb, but the cabin buys us time. He turned to Vivian. Ma'am, you'll give a statement while we stabilize the child. Sit, drink water. She sat because her knees refused to hold. Two backup officers stood near Vivian, firm yet courteous, and her anger thinned into defeat under the practical kindness governing the room. She signed preliminary forms with shaking hands slowly. A canteen touched her palm. She stared at the steam rising from the stove as if it carried scenes she could not bear to see again. Boots lined up to dry. Ezra's color crept back notch by notch while Titan kept a guard that looked like rest unless anyone moved too fast. Caleb spoke with the deputy, returned, and let his posture ease a fraction. Aunt Sarah is on record, he said to Sam and Elena, voice pitched so Ezra could hear names and plans. She asked for welfare checks if anything ever seemed off. She's en route. Elena nodded. Vivian watched and sagged. Anger that had fed on thin meals for months leaked out, leaving fear, regret, and a dawning acceptance that help had arrived and it did not look like her. I messed up, she said, hoarse. The deputy didn't argue. He wrote, then explained process, rights, options, counseling and next steps, blunt but not cruel. Sam handed Caleb a second mug. Caleb took a careful sip, then crouched again by the bench. How's that, bud? Ezra lifted his eyes. Warm, he said, voice small but intact. Sir Bark is warm too. Titan huffed once and set his chin across Ezra's shin with the steady confidence of a partner who needs no language to understand mission. Elena offered a small cookie, broke it and waited. Ezra reached, ate slowly and looked surprised that sweetness was allowed. He lifted the mug again. A pleased hum slipped out and Elena's smile brightened. If this moment warms your heart, share a kind word below for kids like Ezra. Caleb said toward a partner's vest camera so the community that had waited through the weather could send warmth back. Time widened. Heat moved inward. Ezra shifted from stiff to drowsy, a safe kind of tired that meant systems were choosing repair. When a small hand slid, searching fur met it at once. Caleb kept a palm on the quilt, A human boundary holding the world in one piece for a child who had walked into a mountain because silence at home had grown louder than wind. Vivian dabbed her eyes with a cuff, stopped at Elena's look, accepted a tissue and whispered thanks. I wanted orders, she said to the floorboards. Bills, shifts, quiet. I forgot he needed more than tasks done. The deputy nodded. We will make space for honesty, he answered. Accountability follows and support. She folded the tissue into a neat square and set it on her knee as if precision could repair the past. Then let her hands drop, empty. Snow eased, cloud thinned. The clock added another minute to survival. Sam checked core temperature, grunted and reached for transport form. Elena wrapped Ezra in a dry jacket a size up and laughed when the sleeves swallowed his hands. Giant, she teased. Ezra grinned and lifted the horse so it could see. Sir Bark, Sir Horse, he whispered, content to count a dog and a carved friend as a matched pair of guardians. Caleb gathered gear, radioed dispatch, and touched Vivian's shoulder once, not in judgment or absolution, simply to anchor everyone to the next step. We'll ride slow, he said. Clinic first, then placements and plan. Vivian nodded, grateful for a road that did not require her to invent directions. She looked at Titan again, and managed a raw smile. Thank you, she said. The shepherd watched her without judgment and returned his gaze to the boy. They moved out together. The cabin released its warmth reluctantly into a sharp night. Breath smoked in pale banners, tires rolled, branches shrugged snow that glittered under lamps, then vanished. In the rear, Ezra held Coco, horse and dog in an arrangement that felt like a new map. Caleb sat where he could touch the blanket and answer every glance. Ahead, the road curved toward town, quiet, steady, possible. Sarah Klein stepped out before the engine quieted. Early 30s, warm brown hair tucked inside a wool cap, a gentle smile steadied by nerves and resolve. Ezra lay wrapped in a quilt with his wooden horse near his ribs and Titan's flank warming his shins. Sarah stopped, palms lifted, as if asking the air permission to hope. Ezra blinked at the new face, uncertain, then saw kindness that did not press or hurry. She crouched slowly, staying outside the blanket's edge. Hello, sweet boy, she said, voice low. Ezra lifted a hand the length of a mitten and touched the sleeve of her coat. Sarah's smile softened into relief so fierce it glistened. May I hold you? She asked. He hesitated, then scooted inch by inch across the quilt until his forehead touched the wool at her shoulder. Her arms folded carefully, protecting the horse, welcoming the weight that felt lighter than fear and heavier than loneliness. You are safe, she whispered. Caleb's gaze warmed. Elena's did too. Sam pretended to check a thermometer so his eyes could blur privately. Outside, wind loosened its grip on the ridge as if a bargain had been struck. Transport rolled at noon, the road sanded, the convoy steady. Truckee's courthouse rose square above the street, windows aglow, steps swept to wet stone. Inside, heat hummed, and Pine Cleaner carried a forest into hallways lined with framed maps. Judge Margaret Holt took the bench with a calm that settled hearts. Gray hair braided and pinned, robe straight, she balanced compassion and rule like a level stone. Counsel recited history without theater, calls logged, home visits, Vivian's cooperation after the storm, Sarah's prior petitions, Nathan's schedule, Ezra's needs. Sarah spoke once. Simply, she loved this child and had fought since his mother's death to keep a door open. Vivian, chastened, admitted harm and agreed to conditions that placed Ezra elsewhere while she accepted help. Caleb described the search without flourish and credited Titan for nearly everything. The shepherd, waiting in the lobby, wagged when he heard his name through the cracked door as if language itself carried treats. Judge Holt reviewed exhibits, set terms for visitation, counseling and reviews, then looked at Ezra over the bench with a grandmother's steadiness. Young man, she said, we are building something secure around you. Her gavel touched wood lightly. Permanent guardianship granted to Sarah Klein. The words rang like a bell heard through snow. Relief moved through the room in a wave that didn't splash, only warm. Outside, light brightened the lake like steel burnished by cloth. That evening, Sarah parked beside a small duplex with a porch lantern and a cedar wreath. Inside, the air smelled of bread and pine candles. A reading chair waited under a window that framed Donner Lake as if the house owned a painting. On a low shelf sat picture books, a tin of crayons and a shoebox labeled Roots, filled with printed maps. Ezra crossed the threshold with the horse held like a passport. He listened to the heater whisper and the kettle tick, then looked up. "This is your home," Sarah said. "You decide where the horse sleeps." He toured slowly, touching the chair arm, peeking into a tidy kitchen, opening a door to a bedroom painted soft gray with a band of mountains marching along one wall. A quilt made from flannel squares covered a low bed. On the dresser, a framed photo of his mother stood beside a tea light that smelled like fresh fur. Sarah set a small dish for coins and found feathers, then slid open a drawer where new socks waited. Ezra placed the horse on the pillow and slid 2 fingers along the carved mane. His shoulders lowered as if a pack had slipped off. "Hungry?" she asked. He nodded. They ate pancakes shaped like engines. Butter pooled in valleys and syrup drew tracks toward the edge of the plate. Afterward she washed. He dried and the rhythm sounded like rain on canvas. They built a fort from kitchen chairs and a blanket printed with stars, then crawled inside with a flashlight while she read about tunnels through granite. Between pages he asked small questions: whether trains remember, whether dogs dream, whether snow can learn gentleness. She answered with honesty that never stung. At bedtime she taught him where the nightlight lives, and how to press the switch himself. He slid under the quilt, the horse tucked against his ribs, eyes on the drawn mountains until his lids closed. Sarah stood in the doorway listening to the quiet, and let tears fall without apology. Morning brought a routine that wrapped care around time. Sunlight climbed the rug, coffee breathed, oatmeal steamed. Ezra opened the tin of crayons and drew Titan with ears forward, tail mid-wag, and a badge tag shaped like a star. He printed the name with careful letters and pinned the page to the fridge with a magnet shaped like a pine cone. Every glance at that drawing steadied him like a hand he could count on. Caleb and Titan visited each week. The shepherd waited at the mat until invited, then padded in with respectful dignity, accepting a scratch before sitting for a soft toss. Ezra giggled when paws slid a little on polished boards and clapped when the return placed the toy exactly at his toes. Caleb leaned near the door frame, boots off, socks warming at a vent, eyes amused over a cup Sarah always filled, as if hospitality were a promise she owed herself. Conversation stayed light unless paperwork required clarity, then turned crisp without losing kindness. Sometimes they walked on the lake path, Sarah holding Ezra's hand while Titan heeled on the other side and Caleb trailed with a bag of treats, pretending he wasn't the one who spoiled discipline. Ezra collected a pine cone, tucked it into his pocket, and told the dog it was a trophy. Later he drew that stroll with blue crayon wake lines behind a green duck, adding a tiny cocoa mug near the margin because every good day deserved a cup. Sarah started an album labeled Firsts, and slid the pictures inside sleeves. First warm night, first fort, first drawing pinned, first sleep without waking, first run down a hallway without glancing back to gauge permission. Nathan called from a safe site above the pass and learned to count small victories rather than miles. He spoke softly, promised visits set by a plan rather than weather, and thanked Sarah for building a harbor they could share. She answered that harbors rarely belong to one captain. Schedules took shape with the patience of carpenters laying beams. Vivian entered counseling, signed every form, and sent a brief letter that admitted harm and wished healing. Sarah read it aloud without adding vinegar or sugar, then tucked it into a folder marked Grown-ups Try. Some nights the wind pressed the windows and Ezra tensed. Sarah would slide a chair beside the bed and hum a tune their mother had used. Titan, allowed up for storm duty, rested his head on the mattress until breathing Caleb texted afterward, "Weather cleared, roads good, proud of the team." Ezra replied with an audio clip of laughter that made 2 phones feel like lamplight. On the first Sunday after thaw, Sarah grilled cheese and warmed tomato soup, then spread a blanket for an indoor picnic. Ezra wore a paper conductor hat, and stamped imaginary tickets for guests. Titan endured the ceremony with saintly patience until the hat landed on his head, and Sarah snapped a picture that belonged in the album under proof joy exists. She printed the photo and taped it beside the drawing. Healing didn't trumpet, it clicked quietly into place, day after gentle day. One afternoon, Ezra asked whether love could be pinned like a picture. Sarah said love prefers to move, yet reminders help. So he drew a second scene, 3 figures by a lake, one holding a leash, another holding a map, the small one in the middle grinning like sunrise. That page joined the first on the humming door. Truckee shifted toward spring, paths thawed, puddles mirrored clouds. Ducks stitched wakes across bright water. Sarah set a candle shaped like a pine sprig and kissed his hair. Caleb laughed at Titan's snoring and promised to return on Thursday. The house exhaled peace that stayed after lamps dimmed, after dishes dried, after steps still. Ezra slept with the horse against his ribs, and a future arranged by steady hands, a shepherd's vow and a town that now felt like family. Spring loosened Truckee's grip on winter until sidewalks shone and pine boughs dripped bright beads. Ezra Holt woke before alarms, swung small legs from the quilt and padded into a kitchen where Sarah Klein hummed while measuring oats. Sunlight spread across a table scattered with crayons and stiff paper. Warm bread scents mingled with a pine candle, gentle proof that this address understood comfort. He touched the wooden horse beside a jar of spoons, smiled at the notch like lightning and tucked it into his jacket pocket so it could hear the day. Outside, puddles mirrored a clean sky while ducks stitched wakes across Donner Lake. Pickups rolled by with bikes upright in narrow racks. Sarah buttoned his light jacket, added a cap because the wind still nipped, and tucked a note into his pocket promising soup after pickup. She pressed a kiss onto his forehead and straightened a paper crown he had made the night before. He carried a lunch tin, the horse and a courage he no longer needed to hide. Truckee preschool sat beside aspens, whose pale trunks lifted coins of new leaves. Paintings lined the hallway at knee height. Nurse Elena Ruiz volunteered on Tuesdays, reading stories on a rug edged with blue tape. Ezra found a spot between Aiden and Luz. Blocks waited nearby, heavy and square, lemon oil faint in their grain. A teacher invited the class to build a city that welcomes shy friends. Ezra pictured a lake path, a porch lamp and a cabin with a stove that spoke in pops. He set a firm foundation and handed Luz 2 arches, pleased when the doorway stood without wobble. Recess drew squeals and a breeze that lifted the paper crown until Sarah pinned it again with a gentle grin from the fence. Ezra sprinted along chalk lanes, paused to retie a friend's shoe, then balanced on a beam with arms out like wings. Laughter sounded like a creek freed from ice. During snack, he shared apple slices, wiped crumbs and whispered thanks for small things, a habit that turned survival into gratitude. When the room dimmed for rest, his eyes drifted toward the sun rippling across the ceiling and noticed that the quiet no longer frightened him. Later, radios chirped near the yard. A white SUV eased beside the fence. Officer Caleb Reed stepped out wearing a Truckee PD parka, unzipped for the sun, hazel eyes bright, posture relaxed. Titan hopped down with a noble shake, amber gaze friendly and alert, ear nicked from long work. Children lined up behind chalk dots while teachers waved visitor passes like tickets. Caleb saluted, then knelt so he met every face without towering. Titan sat, offered a paw to nobody in particular, and won every heart in one breath. "Today we thank a helper," Caleb said. He showed a small badge shaped like a star with a tiny paw at the center. "For courage during storm and kindness every day since." He called Ezra by his full name as if in a ceremony. Knees wobbled, yet feet held. Titan leaned closer and breathed a greeting that felt like a handshake. Caleb pinned the junior K-9 assistant badge on the paper crown, then moved it carefully to the jacket because crowns wander. Titan barked once, low and warm, exactly right for a playground. Ezra laughed, the sound bright enough to tug smiles from teachers who had learned not to cry at happy things during school hours. If Ezra's courage inspires you, comment hope to spread his light. The afternoon brought a story circle. Elena read about mountains that shelter valleys. When she paused, Ezra offered one sentence. Protection can be gentle and strong at the same time. The room held still, not from pity, only respect. A classmate slid an extra crayon toward him, a tiny ritual of belonging. At dismissal, Sarah thanked the staff, squeezed Caleb's hand and offered coffee that would not require a badge. Titan accepted a biscuit with impeccable manners and sat like a statue guarding a museum. Justice moved in parallel, steady as survey pin. Vivian Cole kept appointments with a counselor, logged hours wiping graffiti, attended parenting classes, and wrote plain apologies without perfume or pleas. Court reviews measured progress, preserved boundaries and refused hate. She worked early shifts at the diner, took quiet evenings without television, and let remorse become responsibility. Letters traveled through caseworkers, short, factual, acknowledging harm, asking nothing beyond patience for change to take root. Accountability lived not as punishment alone, but as a structure that prevented harm while offering tools for repair. On Saturday, the trio walked the lake trail. Patches of snow lingered under firs while long sections steamed. Titan trotted between child and aunt, adjusting pace so short legs never had to rush. Caleb pointed toward gulls banking on ripples and explained lift with open palms. Ezra copied the motion and grinned when his fingertips caught air. At a bench, Sarah poured cocoa into a lidded cup. Ezra sipped, rubbed a cedar chip he kept in his pocket, and asked, "The bad things are gone, right?" She did not pretend storms never return. "Bad things don't get to be in charge," she said. "We have people, plans, and God's help." He nodded and leaned into Titan's shoulder, satisfied by an answer that did not hide the truth. Back home, a refrigerator hummed behind Ezra's sketch of Titan. New pages joined it, a bridge of blocks, a blue lake, a badge shining on cloth. He added Caleb with a flashlight, Sarah with a map, and himself in the middle, wearing the crown now pinned above his heart. Every magnet clicked like a promise. Routine stitched days together with a sturdy enough thread to. Sundays included calls with Nathan Holt from Safer Sites, scheduled rather than improvised. They counted new words, marked height on a doorframe, and laughed at Titan snoring near the phone. Nathan thanked Sarah without ceremony, and asked for lists so visits felt smooth instead of heroic. Planning replaced longing with logistics that worked. Ezra held the phone with both hands, and told his father that the dog's fur smelled like warm sunshine. Nathan promised a picnic when schedules and courts agreed, then sent a photo of a small wooden car he was shaping during break. Short squalls returned, yet fear knocked without entering. Ezra knew where nightlights lived, where coats hung, and which mug held cider. He knew Titan would visit, Caleb would answer messages, and Sarah would read until margins faded. Preschool taught letters, home taught trust. The town taught how groups stand like trees around saplings. His steps lengthened, sleep deepened, appetite returned. He told jokes that made no sense and laughed anyway because joy had time to practice. Accountability did not erase pain, it drew boundaries so healing could proceed. Volunteer shifts introduced Vivian to elders who thanked her for polished rails, teenagers who waved as she collected trash, and a librarian who pressed a book about patience into her hand without commentary. She discovered that carrying a just weight feels lighter than pretending it does not exist. Reports improved. A judge noted progress, maintained conditions, and extended counseling, because slow work lasts longer than quick promises. Responsibility gained muscle, and blame lost its appetite. Truckee slid toward late spring. Rivers settled. Wildflowers tested path edges. At preschool, Ezra helped clean blocks, then welcomed a new boy at the sand table, and built a tunnel that did not collapse. On the way home he asked for extra paper. That night he drew stars above a cabin and a line of paw prints leading to an open door. Sarah praised the composition like a curator, and placed it squarely under the pinecone magnet. Ezra tapped the horse, straightened the crown on the hook, and whispered thanks that felt like prayer. Caleb texted a photo of Titan wearing a toddler backpack during a demo. Ezra cackled and declared the image museum-worthy. The badge caught evening light, small yet radiant, a reminder that protection sometimes looks like fur, sometimes like court orders, sometimes like a steady aunt who keeps soup simmering. Healing endured workdays, storms, weekends, and quiet Tuesdays. It lived in routine, in watchful eyes, and in a community that stayed after the headline faded. By month's end, Ezra could cross the playground, without checking the door, sleep through wind-rattling gutters, and ask for seconds without apology. Sarah scheduled a picnic as a celebration of ordinary triumphs. Caleb brought a thermos and a worn tennis ball. Titan fetched, returned, and placed it at Ezra's feet every time, an oath made visible. The boy's laugh rang over the water while gulls stitched silver lines behind him. A town listened, nodded, and went on tending fences, plows, classrooms, and pews, proving that safety grows where many hands agree to hold it. Snow surrendered its grip on Truckee step by gentle step, revealing sidewalks that shone like wet slate, pines lifting bright tips, and Donner Lake blinking silver through bands of cloud. In that thawed light, A small boy wearing a paper crown pinned above his junior K-9 assistant badge splashed through shallow puddles while a carved horse rode in his pocket. Ezra Holt laughed with the stunned relief of someone who has learned that doors can open and stay open. The sound ran across water, bounced from cabins and returned with a promise: the storm is not the last chapter. Remember that night? Wind slashed at roofs, the pass groaned, and a 4-year-old climbed toward a line of wire because a house had grown too cold for hope. A patrol SUV crawled, wipers knocking like a stubborn clock. Titan, a scar-eared German shepherd with amber eyes that rid distance, inhaled a faint thread of warmth and pulled. Officer Caleb Reed followed with boots biting crust and a lamp carving a tunnel through white noise. Under a bowed pine they found blue lips, a shaking chest and a wooden horse shielded by small hands. The dog lay like a living blanket, heat seeping into numb legs. The officer wrapped foil that sang softly around a fragile life and said words that steadied breath. "You're safe now, buddy." Since then, days have stitched themselves into steadiness. Courtrooms offered structure without spectacle. Judge Margaret Holt balanced compassion with rule, granting guardianship to Sarah Klein, who walked into the outpost carrying patience the way others carry equipment. She furnished a harbor, a reading chair under a window that frames the lake, pine candles, a drawer filled with socks, a kitchen that smells like bread. She learned the map of Ezra's fears and replaced crossroads with simple signs. Her voice, a nightlight, cocoa, prayers at a table where gratitude lives. Love did what storms cannot mended. Caleb and Titan kept visit. The officer brought calm, the dog brought joy, and together they modeled a kind of protection that stands close without smothering. On weekdays, Elena Ruiz read on the preschool rug. On Sundays, Nathan Holt called from safer jobs and practiced the art of showing up exactly when promised. Even Vivian Cole, once narrowed by bitterness, stepped into accountability counseling, service, letters with honest sentences. Justice walked beside compassion, not behind it. Boundaries held, help arrived, and harm lost the right to be in charge. Truckee itself played a role. Plows cleared, teachers noticed, neighbors called, medics brewed cocoa in a cabin smelling of cedar where a stove snapped like a friendly fire. Ordinary people turned into instruments of rescue because love can use any willing hands. God sends help in the darkest storm. Sometimes it looks like a K-9 team on a power-cut trail. Sometimes it looks like a judge speaking steady words. Sometimes it looks like an aunt who keeps soup warm until a frightened child believes warmth will remain. Today, Ezra runs along the lake path with Titan padding beside him, tail marking a slow metronome of contentment. Caleb walks behind with a thermos. Sarah keeps pace with a folded map and a smile that says future. The badge gleams on a small jacket. The crown hangs from a hook at home, ready for pretend trains or indoor parades. Ezra stops to watch gulls skate the wind, then tosses a ball. Titan returns it with the gravity of a knight offering a ring. Laughter lands like sunlight on old snowfields. Inside the duplex, drawings paper the fridge. One shows a storm opening like a stage curtain, while a beam of light points toward a boy under branches. Another shows 3 figures by the lake, a woman holding a rope, an officer holding a cup, and a child between them holding a leash. Below the magnet shaped like a pine cone, block letters say thank you. When night knocks on windows, fear does not enter. Ezra knows where coats hang, which book comes next, and that a shepherd will lie down beside him when thunder tries to bluff. So what remains for the rest of us who watched a rescue become a life? Remember the lesson written across that mountain: no child should feel unloved. Communities can protect. Faith turns strangers into kin. Do not wait for perfect timing. Pay attention to the way a tracking dog breathes. Patient, purposeful, unafraid to commit. Check on quiet homes. Learn the names of small neighbors. Offer rides, meals, coats, and listening. Support counselors, caseworkers, teachers, and the officers who choose gentleness. Cut through apathy like headlights through rain. Ezra scoops water with both hands and flings it toward the sky, watching drops sparkle like a new alphabet. Sarah cheers. Caleb salutes. Titan shakes and sneezes. then leans close so a small palm can feel the warmth and thick fur. The wooden horse peeks over a pocket lip like a loyal witness. This is what redemption looks like up close. Breath and rhythm, routines that hold, laughter that needs no permission. A town that stays after the sirens stop. If you carry a wound from storms you survived, hear this. Second chances exist. If you know a family fraying under pressure, remember resources exist. If you wonder whether God still moves, look at a child wearing a tiny badge, at a dog who will not break his watch, at an aunt who keeps both doors and schedules open. Miracles are rarely loud. They prefer ordinary hands. Before we close, return once more to that line of wire where the wind sang, and a blue thread fluttered. A boy left a sign without meaning to, and a teen read it like scripture. That is how rescue works. Someone signals, someone notices, someone answers. Keep watch for threats. Tie your own where others can see them. Truckee's evening settles soft and gold. Church bells count the hour. Porch music drifts from a radio. A kettle begins to sing. Ezra presses the final magnet onto a new picture. Titan asleep on a mat with one eye open, and then turns toward the table where soup waits. He bows his head with Sarah and thanks God for bread, for friends, for a strong dog, for a badge shaped like hope. A simple prayer closes the loop that opened on a ridge. If you believe in second chances, share this story with someone who needs hope. Comment on your country and type Amen as a prayer for every child still waiting for love. Subscribe to join us in stories of faith and healing. And tonight, wherever you live, leave one light on. Some small traveler may be reading the road by it. May your home be a harbor, your eyes attentive, your hands ready and your heart brave enough to answer storms with tenderness.